on UN Agenda 2030 and the 17 sustainability goals. So I'll pass you over to Sandi.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and thank you to all who've organised this this event. I mean, it's absolutely amazing, everything that's gone into it. Yes, that was quite scary. I'm sure you'll all agree. And how did we get here to this point? And my thing is for the last 17 years, I've been doing a big deep dive into what was then known as Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 2030. So I'm going to, I don't know how I get this on. Oh, there it is. I'm just going to take you on I'm going to have to hurry with this because I've only got 40 minutes and it's quite a lot to get through because I'm also dealing with a bit of the farming stuff afterwards. I just want to really say that this has been a very, very long-term plan, going way, way back before the 1970s. Actually, as Mark said, it started with the technocracy movement in the 1930s, which I'll go into, where they tried to create an energy-based economy then. But it didn't quite work. They hadn't got the technology, and it all kind of fell apart when the Second World War happened. So it really, I'm focusing on Agenda 21 at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. Now, as Mark said, everything seemed to be sort of quite fun in the 60s, 70s, 80s. The 90s, it began to go a little bit wonky. And there's a reason for that, and that is because Agenda 21 kicked in. Now, this is Agenda 21. It's the agenda for the 21st century, and it was launched in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 at something called the Earth Summit. And at the Earth Summit, it's a 42-chapter document, and on the face of it, it talks about sustainability and environmentalism and conservation, but at its heart, it seeks to remove man from nature and control man, put into urban areas, urban cities, smart cities, if you like. And they really wanted to take all the resources and use them and take them away from us and control them. And so this is, there were three major Club of Rome reports that were the precursors to Agenda 21. So I'll be going through those as well. Now, as I say, this is the technocracy movement again. This was really a bunch of political scientists. I think Mark's gone through this, so I won't dwell too much on this. But it was really a group, mainly from Columbia University. They got together and they decided to, they were fed up. It was after the Depression. They decided to create a new economy, and that would be an energy-based economy as opposed to a price-based economy, because they were fed up with politicians and bankers, and it's very similar to the way we are now. But again, this didn't work, and it was shelved until the 1970s when it was reborn by Zbigniew Brzezinski. Now, this is the Club of Rome were very instrumental behind the United Nations. The Club of Rome was created by the United Nations, and the Club of Rome reports that created Agenda 21 are very important. Basically, the Club of Rome is a global think tank for the United Nations, and it was founded in 1968 at the Rockefeller's estate in Bellagio in Italy by Aurelio Peccei, and he was an Italian industrialist. And he founded, he was with the Rockefeller Foundation. They owned the Bellagio estate, and so it was created there. Really, their whole concept is to create crisis. So what they do is they formulate a crisis through which the world could be united under a common threat. Global problems need global solutions. So it's a Hegelian dialect. They use problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem and they find the solution. And we'll see how this works. So one of the major, there's three major Club of Rome reports that go behind Agenda 21, and the first one was in 1972, which is limits to growth, and it was all about, I've got it here, it's all about population control and population reduction. And it was all about resources. There's finite resources, and there's not enough to go around. And they made wild assumptions, computer model assumptions, about how we would actually not be able to sustain ourselves by 1980. So all of those were, we know what happened because it was all computer modeling and fear. And it was a big ideology at the time. There was a guy called Paul Ehrlich who wrote something called the population bomb, and it was all fired up. There's too many of us, not enough resources, humans have to go. And it's all kind of quite eugenics, sort of Malthusian thought. So that was limits to growth. The seed was planted then. And then we have, if you look at the way they created all these habitat conferences in the 1970s, land, because of its unique nature and the crucial role it plays in human settlements, cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of the accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. Now, this is where the whole kind of communitarian fusion between capitalism and communism really kicked in at this time, because private ownership had to be held in the collective. This was the idea. So anyway. It goes on about, and that was Len Gertler. He was the Centre for Human Settlements. You see, they'd already been going into how are we going to control these humans? We put them in human settlements, and we control the land, and we own the land. So that was in 1975. And then you've got, Zbigniew Brzezinski reignited the whole technocracy movement in the 1970s, around 1971, 72, and he wrote this book, Between the Two Ages. So it was reignited. And the second book, the second Club of Rome, is our Common Future. And this was really a second Marshall Plan to apparently to make every country equal. And this is when all our industry went over to India and China, and all the tech industry went crazy over there, and a lot of industry went out to India and China because they had to make a parity between the West and the East. And this was really a kind of commutarian book, really. It was written by Gro Harlem Brundtland, and she was the Prime Minister of Norway at the time, a socialist lady, and it was just, it really was a Marshall Plan to create, to make everything equal, a very commutarian ideal for global commutarianism. Wealth needs to be distributed from the wealthy countries to, the wealthy, what they called the wealthy polluting West, to the third world, which seemed quite, in a way, very worthy. But what happened afterwards, as we know at the Paris Climate Conference, is that India and China are now pushing their whole nuclear and their coal, and we are being sanctioned, and we are the ones who are being really hit with the whole carbon sanctions, not India and China. And that's something that's still going on. Now, the last Club of Rome report was this one, and this is important because it was really where they brought in the whole global warming scam, the whole thing, and it was all about how they could create the crisis that they needed to bring the whole world together, to get the whole world under control. And I'm going to give you a couple of quotes from this because it's very interesting. And they're talking about enemies. They have to, because obviously wars had gone. We don't have the Cold War. We didn't in 1991. This was published in 1991, just before the Earth Summit. So the wars had gone, and how do we create enemies? The need for enemies seems to be a common historical factor. States have striven to overcome domestic failure and internal contradictions by designating external enemies. The scapegoat practice is as old as mankind itself. When things become too difficult at home, divert attention by adventure abroad. Bring the divided nation together to face an outside enemy, either a real one or else one invented for the purpose. So that's their idea, is create some kind of enemy. And they created an enemy. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. In their totality and in their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat which demands the solidarity of all people. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. So in 1991, we became the enemy of humanity, and that is why we're in the state we're in now, because that was a perceived ideology that we were the enemy of humanity. They needed to create an enemy. Now, the guy behind the Earth Summit is this guy called Maurice Strong, and he's a grandfather of Agenda 21. He headed up the Earth Summit. He was a member of the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, the Council for Foreign Relations, a member of the Fabian Society. He was a self-confessed communist in ideology and capitalist in methodology. And he really pushed the new communism, which is communitarianism, which really is all about the fusion of capitalism and communism. It's a very new ideology. It was brought up in 1968 by a guy called Amitai Etzioni, and do look him up. He's quite an extraordinary man, really. I think he was a psychologist. He was again at Columbia University, and he was an Israeli. I think he was a psychologist and social scientist. Anyway, Maurice Strong was exiled to China to avoid prison for being involved in the oil for food scandal where the UN Security Council made a resolution to supply Iraq with food in exchange for oil. There were revelations of corruption of funds involving Maurice Strong, Adnan Khashoggi, and many other oil billionaires. He loved China and he loved the communist system. So this man, who was an oil billionaire, he worked for the Rockefellers for many, many years. He was Secretary General of the United Nations, and it was he that became the grandfather of Agenda 21. So he pushed it. He really wanted this whole thing, that they would try and get the world to sign up to save the planet under the guise of anthropogenic global warming. And they managed to do it. And at the Earth Summit, there were many people there. There was Edmund de Rothschild. There was the Rockefeller Foundation people there. There was David Rockefeller was there. They had many, many activists, green activists, paid activists. Prince Charles was there. And they managed to do it. They managed to get 178 leaders of countries to sign up to Agenda 21. And so therefore global governance. And this is what we ended up with. And they clinked their champagne glasses on the Royal Yacht Britannia in Rio de Janeiro harbour. We did it. We got all the countries to sign up to global governance to save the planet. They'd already invested in the carbon credit banks. Obama was there. He had already invested in the Chicago Climate Exchange. They had all invested in green technologies and green carbon-based currency, financial instruments. So they knew where it was going. Now, this is the Global Diversity Assessment. This came out in 1997. It's about this big. I didn't bring it with me. It's huge. And it is a management and control inventory of every resource on our planet and how they are going to manage it. And it's called the Global global biodiversity assessment, and it's very, very big, and it's got everything in there. It also talks about the Wildlands Project of America, where you can see that all the smart cities are mapped out with just corridors in between, where there's only federal and military use, so to keeping people into smart cities, a bit Hunger Games-ish, horrible. Anyway, also at the Earth Summit, they set up something called ICLEI, which is the International Committee for Local and Environmental Initiatives. ICLEI was set up to implement Agenda 21 right down from global to local. And this is why it's been so pernicious, because it went literally from a global idea. They managed to get and infiltrate every single town council in the world. So ICLEI was in your town council. It's now called the Town Deal. They call it all sorts of things, but it is the green agenda was pushed, and really a bit like Common Purpose, it was pushed into our town councils. Again, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they were also bought. They were scientists all bought and paid for to come up with false data. And this is where all of the Attenborough film, he always quotes the IPCC whenever they say, oh, but 97% of scientists believe that climate change is anthropogenic. That's the IPCC. There's plenty of science now that proves that this is all wrong, but most of them are retired, because if you're not being paid to push out the nonsense, then you can tell the truth. We had ClimateGate in 2009. And this really pushed a lot of the nonsense. You know, we found out the nonsense, but it was all buried. It's where I think it was 179 emails were hacked by the University of East Anglia and the Hadley Research Centre by a US intelligence agency. The content of these emails were damning to the global warming lobby. Michael Mann from the Penn State University was encouraging scientists at these institutions to falsify the data, to hide the decline, because of course it wasn't warming then in 2009. Anyway, you know, the famous hockey stick was created by Michael Mann, where he actually falsified the graph for the temperature to go up instead of down, so it was like a hockey stick. But there's a wonderful paper on, it's called Global Warming, a Case Study on Groupthink. It's by a very wonderful man called Christopher Booker, who was a great friend of mine. And he wrote it, sadly he's not with us anymore, he used to write for the Telegraph and the Times. And he wrote the best, I think, and you can get it as a free PDF. Do look at it, it's amazing. Right. Now, Agenda 2021 became Agenda 2030, which is just a goal, on the 15th of September 2015. And this is where they launched the 17 goals, which had originally been 8 goals, the Millennium Goals, which hadn't really been achieved. So they needed to accelerate it. So they held this big event in Rome, and the Pope endorsed it. He was the one that said, right, okay. So really, he became the servant of the UN at that time, endorsing the 17 goals of Agenda 21. Obama flew over, and they had a big launch of it. Bit underreported, to be honest. Not many people remember it. And they launched these goals. I'll just go through just a couple of them. Goal 1 is end poverty, poverty alleviation and social protection. A UN solution, AI-enabled digital footprint for credit mobile money access, blockchain identity solutions to enable economic identities for all and refugees. But the reality is make everyone equally poor, because this is all about equality worldwide, make everyone equally poor because they want control. UBI, universal basic income, because they know that the robots are going to take over. They're going to take the jobs, so they've got to provide us with something called universal basic income, all with fixed amount of carbon credits, because the economy will be this carbon economy. The normal fiat money is going. You will literally have your carbon credits, and that will be your allowance. And if you're a good citizen, then you can spend those. If you're not, you'll be sanctioned, because they're watching everything you do. And if you've eaten too much meat or whatever it might be, or not, you've eaten too much sugar and you're diabetic, because it's all going to be linked, This will be the way they will assess you. Analysis of social credit through digital footprint, all the social media platforms. And this is just like the Zima system in China, the social credit system in China. Goal 2, end hunger. That's a big ask, isn't it? And of course, it's controlling the food chain. As we know, they don't want us to, they want to control the food chain, because if you control the food, you can control the people. And it's, low-cost GMO, mass-produced food, production by Monsanto and synthetic proteins, insect biomass, no meat or no meat, or everything's sort of lab-grown or fake meat. Sensors on blockchain to eliminate waste. They're big on waste. Smart food storage, real food replaced with synthetic lab food. Your consumption habits recorded on the blockchain. Monitoring sensors in waste bins and storage units in the refrigerators. So this is all about controlling our food, and it won't be nutritious food if they have their way. This is why we need numbers. We need people to really understand what's happening to us, because it's very frustrating knowing that this is all happening, and we just need numbers. Good health and well-being. The reality is you'll be, diagnosed by a bot, and they're restricting, your access to doctors. So this is all kind of pushing it all onto predictive, preventative, and participatory medicine. And it's all, they're encouraging Fitbits to record everything so that everything can be connected, and they'll know exactly what your health is like. Because again, that will be all part of the control. Your medical records and genetic history tied to the blockchain via ID passports. Goal 4, quality education. And it's inclusive access to education, quality of education and facilities. The UN AI-driven assessments to enable the delivery of continuous feedback, AI-driven curriculums, teaching plans, and content to be driven by devices. And this is what Mark was talking about, where they can read the emotions of the children. They know who are the leaders, who are the more sensitive ones, who is going to fit into their military-industrial complex, and those children will be scored. And they're betting on them. They literally are betting on the outcomes of children. And this is unbelievable, and I'm sure it'll all be covered in the film. We jump now to 2019, and those goals, they're not moving fast enough. So what do? They hold Klaus Schwab and Antonio Guterres and people from the United Nations. They hold a meeting in Geneva, and they call it the Strategic Framework Partnership Forum in June 2019. And the whole aim for that was to accelerate the goals of Agenda 2030. In November 2019, 4 months later, they then held the WEF, the United Nations, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation got together on a tabletop exercise, a what-if scenario. What if a novel coronavirus escaped from a wet market in Brazil? What if? What would we do? It was a 3-day, and it's still on the web if you go to look at it. It's called Event 201. And they realized, oh gosh, what would we do if we had this pandemic happen? And then, of course, Bill and Melinda are there saying, well, we've got the solution. So we know what happened after that. And this is what Klaus Schwab said. The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. It's a social engineering project, of course, and it always has been. It's been planned for a long time, and the pandemic was the vector to get it. While we were all asleep, the infrastructure went in to change our world forever. All the biometrics went into the supermarkets. I'm sure you noticed suddenly all the human tills are gone, and you've got facial recognition at the self-service tills. Everything went behind glass cabinets. As Aman Jabi was telling you, the glass cabinets will be there because there will be sensors on those. You will not be able to open them if your credit rating isn't right. If your carbon credits aren't right, then you will not have access to those cabinets. Now, I just want to quickly go through the Absolute Zero document. This was a document that was created well, it was commissioned by the UK government in, I think it was 2017, and it was really commissioned by, they got all the top universities, Cambridge, Oxford, University of East Anglia, Durham, all those universities, to create a study really on and a projection of how we can reach absolute zero. Forget net zero, they want absolute zero. This is the roadmap, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. But no planes out of the UK by 2030, but from between 2030 and 2049. No shipping out of the UK by between 2029 or 2030 and 2049, 2050. No beef or lamb production after 2030. No wood-burning stoves, no gas boilers, no gas appliances. Restrictions on food production, total energy to transport food cut to 50% or 60%. Construction, no concrete and mortar to be phased out. Retrofitting of all houses to comply with net zero legislation. Manufacturing reduced by 50%, goods smaller and to last longer. Electricity and wind and solar shortage problems. Obviously, we will have shortage problems. And so it was an increase in renewables. We have to be reliant on renewables. And as we know, if you look at a pie chart of renewable energy is just a tiny sliver of the entire grid. And actually, in the winter, and I know this because I went to an energy conference when I was on the road doing all the research for this, and there were people there saying to me, in the winter, we have to bury generators underneath the earth in England, because in winter we cannot fulfill the grid. And there's an energy company, I think it's called Green Frog, and they supply the grid with diesel-generated energy from under the ground. So there's no way renewables will work. This is set to fail, and it's to make us very cold, very poor, and and have nothing. So then we have the C40 cities, climate lockdowns, and the C40 cities. I mean, Ken Livingstone sort of introduced this in 1999, and Boris Johnson in 2009 set it up with Michael Bloomberg, and he's big on impact investing as well, and Carlos Morenos, and they set up the C40 Cities International, which Sadiq Khan is the chairman. So the C40 Cities is really behind the 15-minute city ideology, and it's my view that they didn't quite make it with the smart cities, because the smart cities were not coming up to speed. Bristol was supposed to be the flagship smart city of Europe, and it kind of fell behind. So I think they just devised a plan of kind of moving it forward a bit by just locking down the cities as they were, like Oxford, Cambridge, Canterbury. And those people are going through hell with the lockdown. Now the climate lockdowns are hitting us. So yeah, that's a C40 city climate leadership group. And what we will see, if there isn't enough pushback, is all these climate lockdowns happening. And this is a way just to control us. They lock off the city, everything's pushed on the ring road, and it doesn't make sense because the pollution is much more on these ring roads. I think Mark flagged this up, the future of urban consumption. Again, that's a document to look at. That was brought forward by the C40 cities, and it's saying ludicrous things like you can only have 3 items of clothing per year that are new. No cars. They're pushing this whole thing. Representing 600 million people. The global covenant of smart city mayors, again, they're bringing in this regionalisation so that the smart city mayors have more power in Parliament and they're unelected. And this is coming from a place where you will actually be dictated to by the covenant of smart city mayors. And this is all being led by the C40 cities. None of us have asked for this. It's totally undemocratic. And yet we're being governed by a bunch of mayors who are taking responsibility for us under the guise of climate change. So all these restrictions will continue. And with the whole idea of regionalisation and what they call making, I think it's city councils unitary, lumping them all together, is to take you further away from the decision-making process. And that's exactly what they're doing. Public-private partnerships, this is, what are public-private partnerships? They're undermining politics and all Western government. This is corporations literally running and being the decision makers. And, funny enough, I've been doing a deep dive into Prince Charles, or King Charles, or whatever you want to call him now. But he sorry. Thank you. He is a major mover and player in all this. He was there, in 1991, getting all the people together for the Earth Summit. He also set up the 5 minutes, thank you. I'll be really quick. He also set up the it was called the Princess Wales Leadership Forum, and that really gave birth to the public-private partnerships, and he's in it up to his neck. He's got so much money in it. We've got environmental social governance scores. This is how you're going to be scored with your business, and you'll be sanctioned if you don't come up to scratch with all the legislation. We've got the energy performance certificates and retrofitting. Natural asset corporations, this is the way you will be, this is going into the farming. You will be sanctioned if you are not coming up to scratch with your sustainability program on your land. And sometimes, some of these targets will be unachievable, and they will have the right to control your land if you don't come up to scratch. And then we've got, even The Economist talking about famine. I mean, they always do this, The Economist, but we are heading, we've had the worst crop failure since World War II at the moment, and nothing is growing because of the water. Everything's waterlogged, and we've got the farmers up in arms. And Sainsbury's, if you look at their future food document, do look at it. They've got a table. They've got a timeline from 2025 to 2169 of how they will actually have us eating, and you can see the bugs, you can see the octopuses. This is what they have in mind, not what we have in mind. And so what they want is for us to own nothing and be happy. And that's it, I think. But apart from the fact that farmers are being squeezed at the moment, their subsidies are being taken away, they're being encouraged to have renewable energy on their land, lots of stuff, but not to grow food. Their subsidies are being taken away over the next 3 years if they don't comply to running businesses on their land that is nothing to do with food production. And the local councils and the planning offices are going ahead with this. So anyway, that's me. And I'm sorry it's... It's not all doom and gloom, because we're humans and we're creative. And if we get together, we can win this, okay?